loaded onto the aircraft, then the next one can be getting built in parallel. So the idea is to look at challenging the current way that operations are done in airports.
Schiphol Airport have also been trialling self-driving vehicles for transporting flight crew and passengers requiring additional help. But the road to us routinely seeing this tech in operation is long. What is the timeline to actually making the airports autonomous?
The timeline for a fully autonomous airport is set on 2050, 50, but I'm very surprised in the last 2 years how far technology has matured. However, integrating that safely in a already very crowded operation might still require us to wait until 2050.
With self-driving vehicles becoming more common in other industries and even on our roads, that timeline might feel long. But this is a highly regulated environment, and one of the toughest challenges is convincing authorities this innovation can be brought in safely and ultimately keep airports moving so our flights depart on time.
One of the only advantages of being the old guy is that I've known every major world leader in the last 30 years, and I've known them personally.
There's a thrill in not necessarily following a straight line, do you know what I mean? Trying things that are different, challenging myself.
I'm an optimist. I'm always believing that anything can be done if you have the will to do it and if you have a clear vision.
Women are still judged by a different metric than men, and certainly judged by a different metric when they do something wrong.
I will continue on with a life of public service, so I will always support the charities and the people that mean so much to me.
When the big names talk, they talk to us.
Live from London, this is BBC News. Israel's Prime Minister is reported to be considering expanding military operations in Gaza, despite growing domestic criticism, including many former defence chiefs. The brother of one of the hostages, shown in a video released by Hamas over the weekend, tells the BBC of his horror.
Seeing those images of my brother as a human skeleton, we understood it's a new kind of cruelty. It's worse than the Taliban, than Al-Qaeda, worse than ISIS. It's the lowest you can get.
Our other headlines: Amber Alert and train cancellations as Storm Floris hits part of the UK, with a danger to life warning in Scotland.
Thousands of homes are without power, including here in North Keswick near Inverness, where I'll have the latest.
A British couple held in Iran have been moved to separate prisons. We'll get family reaction live this half hour. And they're described as the most beautiful snails in the world. We hear from the scientists trying to save them. Hello and welcome to Verified Live. We start in Gaza and the pressure building on Benjamin Netanyahu to bring the war to an end. The main hostage support group in Israel has accused the Prime Minister of leading the country and their loved ones to doom after reports emerged that he wants to expand military operations in Gaza. Benjamin Netanyahu says he will bring together his security cabinet this week to discuss next steps and war goals. The families say they want a ceasefire deal, and the calls from within Israel are getting louder. Meanwhile, Hamas released a propaganda video over the weekend of an emaciated hostage being held in Gaza, and a warning: you may find the following picture distressing. Well, this image is taken from the video where Eviatar David is also seen digging a grave in an underground tunnel. So let's begin this hour with an interview with his brother, who spoke to the BBC.
He's a human skeleton. He was being starved to the point where he can be dead at any moment. And he suffers a great deal. He barely can speak, he barely can move. He's in that point. So we have to be so focused on delivering the message, which is Eviatar is dying. We need to give him medicine. We need to give him food, proper food, and he needs to get this treatment now, or else he will die. And all the leaders of the world should unite in that message right now to save Eviatar, to save the hostages from the cruel, twisted hands of Hamas. Seeing those images of my brother as a human skeleton, we understood it's a new kind of cruelty. It's worse than the Taliban, than Al-Qaeda, worse than ISIS. It's the lowest you can get. My parents are shattered. My father can't sleep. My mom cries all day. My sister, somehow, my younger sister, fighting alongside me. When they watched the video, and my father could barely recognize his own son's voice.
Well, the brother of one of those hostages being held in Gaza. Let's get the latest now on those reports of an expanding IDF operation in Gaza. Let's go to our correspondent live in Jerusalem, Hugo Bechega. And Hugo, is there any more detail emerging of what Benjamin Netanyahu has in mind here?
Yeah, Matthew, there has been a statement released by the Prime Minister's office today saying that the Prime Minister will convene his cabinet this week to discuss and to instruct the Israeli military on the next steps in Gaza and on how to achieve the war goals. And again, the goals are to destroy Hamas, free the hostages and ensure that Gaza no longer poses a threat to Israel. But the Prime Minister is under a lot of pressure internationally. There is anger over the catastrophic humanitarian situation in Gaza, and domestically as well. There is growing pressure on the Prime Minister. Today there has been a letter with 600 former senior security officials, a letter that was addressed to President Trump, urging him to put pressure on the government to end the war in Gaza. And there's also a lot of pressure from the families of the hostages, particularly after those videos with two hostages, Eviatar David and Rom Braslavsky, released in the last few days, in which they are seen in a very difficult situation, emaciated, extremely weak, shocking images that have sparked a lot of anger in Israel. But again, more calls from the families of the hostages who have been urging the Prime Minister to strike a deal with Hamas. They say that the strategy of the government to put pressure on Hamas to force it to negotiate a deal hasn't really worked, has failed, and they say that the only way to guarantee the release of the hostages who remain alive, 20 hostages are believed to be alive in Gaza, is through a negotiated deal with Hamas. And for a very long time, many of these families have been accusing the Prime Minister of prolonging the conflict to guarantee the survival of his governing coalition, particularly because of those hardline members who have been threatening to quit the government if there is any kind of deal with Hamas. And this could lead to the collapse of the coalition. So a very difficult situation for the Prime Minister as he's facing pressure from multiple sides.
We'll hear from one of those signatories in a moment or two, Hugo, in terms of that open letter to Donald Trump. But tell me more about the situation on the ground in Gaza when it comes to levels of starvation, levels of malnutrition, and how much aid Israel is actually allowing in.
Yeah, so the United Nations and aid organizations are still saying that a very limited amount of aid is getting in. We've seen desperate, scenes of crowds stopping convoys, trying to get any food they can get. Really, there have been reports of looting as well, of armed gangs, looting some of those convoys. But the reality, according to aid organizations, is that aid is not reaching, those who need it in many parts of Gaza. There have been reports today of at least 40 Palestinians who were killed as a result of Israeli airstrikes and also Israeli gunfire in parts of Gaza. Reports saying that at least 10 of them were killed trying to get aid. Now, there hasn't been a reaction from the Israeli military, but again, we're seeing that these shootings have been happening almost on a daily basis, particularly around the sites of the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, this controversial new mechanism introduced, supported by the Americans in Israel, largely bypassing the United Nations and aid organizations for the distribution of aid in Gaza. So the humanitarian crisis in Gaza continues, a very dire situation for the population there.
Hugo Pacheco live there in Jerusalem. Thanks very much. Well, as Hugo was telling us there, hundreds of retired Israeli security officials have written an open letter to Donald Trump urging him to pressure their own government to end this war. The signatories include former heads of the Mossad and Shin Bet security services and 3 former military chiefs of staff. In their letter, they say Hamas no longer poses a strategic threat to Israel, and so the military operations in Gaza are no longer just. Well, Itamar Yar is a former deputy head of Israel's National Security Council and director of Commanders for Israel's Security, and he explained to me why he was one of the signatories to that letter.
This letter was signed in the name of more than 550 senior ex-military, the security services, the national police, and the Foreign Office ex-ambassadors. And the reason that we decided to send this letter to President Trump is basically because we understood that he is the one that have more influence on one hand on the Israeli Prime Minister and on the other hand on Qatar and indirectly on Hamas.
I've seen quoted from those who have signed this letter. They think Israel should announce that it accepts an end to the war in exchange for a return of all of the hostages. Isn't that what Hamas has already offered?
Look, there are differences, as you know, especially in the Middle East, but not only the Middle East. There are differences between what different forces, different people say, and what they really do on the ground. Hamas is saying, stop the war and everything will be peaceful. I'm not so sure that this is the case, but we believe that the Israeli government don't have another choice now. Strategically, we will not be able, it seems so, that we will not be able by using force to release the hostages.
But just to be absolutely clear, and sorry to cut across you, you think the Israeli government now should accept an end to the war, and part of the reason to do that is to get an agreement on the return of all the hostages. That is what you think the Israeli government should offer up now, is it?
Definitely, but it's a combination of those elements, the release of the hostages, the end of the war, to allow the Israeli society and the Israeli armed forces to recover after more than a year and a half of war. And at the same time, it will allow some kind of understanding with the regional Arab countries that are willing to create some kind of a regime that will take place or will take the control of Gaza from the Hamas hands.
That was Itamar Yar, who was the former deputy head of Israel's National Security Council, talking to me a little earlier on today's programme. Let's turn to the storms here in the UK. Storm Flores has brought unseasonably strong winds and heavy rains for Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England and parts of Wales. An amber weather warning is in place for most of Scotland, where high winds could pose a danger to life, with gusts of 90 miles per hour in coastal and exposed areas. ScotRail has warned of significant disruption to services. Aer Lingus flights have been cancelled, ferry crossings have been suspended, and on the roads there are hazardous conditions, with Police Scotland warning drivers to avoid unnecessary travel. Let's get more from our correspondent, Jessica Lane.
Across Scotland today, strong winds and heavy rain. Storm Flores brought gusts of up to 90 miles an hour and damage, destruction and delays. People were warned to stay inside and only travel if it was essential. Those who were vulnerable told to take particular care.
Significant debris can be raised up by this type of high winds. As we said, avoid journeys that aren't required, and when you are driving on the roads, then ensure that you travel at a speed that's commensurate to the conditions, and give yourself lots of room to stop or avoid any debris or anything that may appear on the road.
And it's not just Scotland that's been affected. A yellow weather warning is still in place across the north of England, Northern Ireland and North Wales.
It's that time of year that people have lots of things outdoors, trampolines or other temporary structures. And so if it's safe to do so, if it's not already too windy, then it's worth securing loose equipment outdoors and taking down other structures and so on that could be blown about.
Many people trying to travel have felt its force. This plane struggled to land at Leeds Bradford Airport earlier. Elsewhere there were cancellations, and at Preston train station this morning, warnings and disruption.
Disappointed, let down, but what can we do? The weather, there's nothing we can do about that.
It's very difficult, and as a passenger, when you buy tickets, you get advance tickets, and it's for a specific journey and for a specific provider.
I'm supposed to be going up to Glasgow, and the train here has been cancelled.
For those who'd planned a summer camping trip, the weather made it hard. And here in Ripon, they took extra precautions.
We knew it was the worst of the weekend weather, but we didn't think it was going to be this bad.
We had a big party marquee almost out last night with the gazebo, and at about 11 o'clock we thought, no, we need to get this down now. So we were stripping the gazebos down last night. We've sort of put some storm pegs in a little bit.
Flores is the 6th named storm of this season, following Storm Eowyn in January. Storms at this time of year aren't uncommon, but it's the strength of its winds which are unusual. Warnings are in place until tomorrow morning, and people are being told to continue to take care until it's passed. Jessica Lane, BBC News.
Well, let's speak live to our reporter Chris McLennan, who's in Inverness for us. And Chris, what's it like? Give us the latest.
Yeah, so Matthew, we're in the midst of this amber warning, and as you say, that means there is a danger to life. Now, that's in place for much of Scotland until 11 p.m. this evening. Now, we've seen widespread travel disruption here across the Highlands and Islands. That means buses, trains and ferries have all been cancelled. Now, camper van drivers have been asked by police to park up and to remain there. Now, that comes after reports were received of those kinds of vehicles toppling over in the wind on the Isle of Skye. Now, we've seen the usual disruption that you'd expect with a storm, fallen trees, damages to the roofs of buildings, debris also on the road, and some of those trees also coming down and impacting several vehicles, so a bit of disruption there for the drivers. Now, we've seen multiple power cuts. There are thousands of homes that are still without power, including here in North Keswick, where we are near Inverness. Now, some of those power cuts have only lasted a short while, but the majority of those have been across the Highlands, Moray and Aberdeenshire. Now, SSEN, the power company, it's drafted in extra engineers to try and help get those people back online, and its last update shortly after 2 o'clock this afternoon had that they are working to restore supplies to up to around 22,500 homes. Now, I'm sure, as you can see behind me here, we've got those strong winds that we've spoken about. Now, the gusts of up to 80 miles per hour, they were recorded in South Uist earlier today. Now, the disruption that we've got, we anticipate some knock-on into tomorrow. Now, the SQA, that's the Scottish Qualifications Authority, it's responsible for educational awards, and tomorrow is exam results day here in Scotland, but they're already warning that they're expecting delays in the mail delivery of exam results. Now, that's to the Outer Hebrides, Orkney and Shetland, but what they have said is that pupils who have signed up in advance for text and email alerts, they should still receive those, as the rest of the country does, around 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. Now, it's not unusual across the Highlands and Islands to see this sort of disruption when storms hit. However, it is unusual to see it at this time of year, and the advice remains for people to only travel if necessary. Matthew.
Chris, thanks very much for that update. Next here on the programme, we have that story of a British couple detained in Iran. They have been moved to separate prisons outside of Tehran. We'll speak live to the family in just a moment or two. Around the world and across the UK, you're watching BBC News. Welcome back to Verified Live. Now, a British couple detained in Iran have been moved to separate prisons in the desert outside Tehran, according to their family. Craig and Lindsay Foreman, who were on a motorbike journey across the world, were arrested in early January and accused of spying, a charge that their family has called baseless. Well, let's talk live to Lindsay's son, Joe Bennett, who joins us on the programme. Joe, thank you for talking to us. Tell me, first of all, when did you find out about this development and how worried are you?
Yeah, thanks for having me on. We had this information come across to us late last night, actually. And these two prisons that they've been moved to, so we understand that my mum's now been moved to Karchat prison. And Craig is in the Greater Tehran Central Prison. They're two of the most notorious detention centres in Iran, from what we've seen, and it has been described by human rights groups as inhumane. We're just incredibly concerned about their welfare now.
It is a terrifying prospect, just every aspect of this story, to be arrested, to be accused of spying. I assume, though, that one of the few things that have helped them is the fact that they have been held together.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that potentially has been a massive help for them. I think still very mentally challenging. But again, now that they have been separated, we're seriously worried for the both of them.
When was the last time you actually spoke to them?
So we haven't spoken to them since the 3rd of January. There's been no direct contact to the family. And so that's why we're asking, especially now that they have been separated, for urgent consular and welfare access and for all the phone calls that we were promised.
Tell me more then about what you want from the British government here.
I think what we're looking for is a bit of acknowledgement now. We have had confirmation from their lawyer that they're being charged with espionage. And now that confirmation has come through, just a bit of acknowledgement from the government that, yes, we hear this. Yes, we're with you, and we're going to do everything we can to get them home as urgently as possible.
In terms of the conversation you've had with the government, these situations are always notoriously difficult because families are stuck in that dilemma. Do they stay quiet and just talk to the Foreign Office? Do they go public? I'm sure all of the dilemmas that you've actually had to go through as a family. How often do you speak to officials at the Foreign Office?
So to be honest with you, the officials at the Foreign Office, it's normally a weekly or bi-weekly chat. And just to say that we gave them a chance to do the quiet diplomacy route, we waited 6 months and we didn't feel that we were getting any movement. And we just thought, especially after the bombing of Tehran prison in Etli Evin, we thought it was time to speak out because we were seriously worried for the two of them.
Do you have any idea, as we're speaking now, about potentially when a trial might be? And give me a sense of how robust they are as individuals, how they'll be coping with what is happening to them.
So in terms of dates or anything set, we've got no inkling of when that might be. We do feel that this is potentially moving in that direction, but as I say, no set date that we've been told of. In terms of how they are as people, they are mentally strong. They have been through experience in life, but nothing I don't think would have prepared them for what they're going through at the moment. And I think, the only solace, as you mentioned earlier, they had was that they were, as we were being told, being held together. I think that's why it's very important, not just for us as the family to have a phone call, but for them to have it as well, because it will give them that boost they need.
Just a final thought, because you touched upon it. What do you know about the conditions of the two places that they've now been moved to?
From what we understand, and as I say, these are live accounts, and it doesn't paint a pretty picture. There can be a lot of mistreatment. I try not to read into it too much because you obviously hope for the best, but yeah, it's pretty dire reading.
Well, Joe Bennett, we have to leave it there, but we are grateful that you've taken time to speak to us, and good luck in the coming days in terms of trying to get any further information. Thanks so much for your time.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, you're watching BBC News. Let's turn to one rather unusual and fascinating story, because snails may not be something you'd think of as being beautiful, but one species found only in the forests of Cuba has been described as the most striking in the world because of its colourful shell. That, though, makes them vulnerable, as collectors and traders want to use them as decorative objects. Well, now researchers are working on ways to protect them, as our science correspondent Victoria Gill now reports.
These are Polymeter snails, described by some mollusk experts as the most beautiful snails in the world, found only in the forests of Cuba. But while they're increasingly rare in the wild, it's remarkably easy to buy their shells online.
So I'm surprised that when we look online here, we can see a lot of Polymeter shells for sale in the UK.
These shells are bought and sold as beautiful decorative objects, but each of these was once a living animal.
How much of a concern is this, seeing them for sale?
And for some of these species, we know they're really quite endangered. So it wouldn't take much for somebody to collect them in Cuba and to trade them, for then it could cause some species to go extinct.
So snail biologists are racing to study and to try to conserve these creatures before they disappear from the wild.
Welcome to Nottingham's Snail Lab.
Here at the University of Nottingham's School of Life Sciences, evolutionary geneticists are analysing samples of the Polymeter snail DNA, decoding the animal's biological blueprint. They want to know how many different species there are, how they're related to each other, and what part of their genetic code gives them their extraordinary, unique colour patterns.
Hola, Bernardo. ¿Cómo estás?
Bien, muy bien.
The researchers here are working closely with their colleagues in Cuba. There, they've embarked on the challenging task of breeding the snails in captivity.
Look at this. This is the snail.
Wow.
They are here for 5 months, and at the moment, almost all adults.
Wow.
It is difficult because we have many blackouts, but they are doing well.
With just a little bit of tissue from one of those snails, we can start to mine information from the genome of the snails. This is a project of 2 parts where my colleagues in Cuba are trying to understand the basics of biology, where the snails are, all kinds of questions to do with that. And then the genetic information that we can then bring in can also ultimately contribute to the conservation.
It's illegal to take Polymeter snails or their shells out of Cuba, but it is legal to sell the shells elsewhere. The researchers hope that understanding their biological secrets and raising the Polymeter's profile will help keep these colourful creatures in the forests where they belong. Victoria Gill, BBC News.
Coming to the end of this half hour, in our next half hour, we'll be getting the latest of that extraordinary finish to the 5th Test match at the Oval. India winning by 6 runs. Remarkable heroics we saw from Wokes turning out to the crease with one arm. Look at that picture, but it wasn't enough at that last wicket. Cue the celebrations from India. They win the Test, they tie the series, so we'll bring you all the very latest. It was an extraordinary final Test match, an extraordinary series, and we'll reflect on that here on the programme in the next couple of minutes. You are watching BBC News.
Now on BBC News, the biggest African and international news stories. Focus on Africa.
Well, you're watching Focus on Africa live from Nairobi on BBC News. Our stories. At least 76 people have been killed, mainly Ethiopian nationals, after a migrant boat sank off the southern coast of Yemen.
What we found out from them that the journey was really dangerous, and it was, and they also tell how many people were on board and how people could manage to escape it.
Meanwhile, a BBC Africa Eye investigation reveals a network of women in Kenya's Rift Valley region who traffic children for sex.
Sometimes you have sex with multiple people. You get injured and harassed by clients. The clients force you to do unimaginable things.
Also coming up in the program, Tanzania and Brighton FC football star speaks on recent injury, missing WAFCON and her plans in England's top-flight football.
I'm very proud, and I will work hard to prove that everything is possible and you can go far as you can when you have a target, when you have a goal.
Thanks for your time. You are watching Focus on Africa. I'm Wahiga Mwaura. Now, we begin with yet another tragedy in one of the world's deadliest migration corridors. At least 76 African migrants have died, most of them Ethiopians, after their overcrowded boat capsized off the coast of southern Yemen in the Gulf of Aden. Dozens more are missing and feared dead. Yemeni security officials say a further 32 people have been rescued from the shipwreck. The UN's migration agency, the International Organization for Migration, said that 157 people were on board when the accident occurred off the Abiyan Governorate. This is in southern Yemen. The migrants were attempting to cross from the Horn of Africa into war-torn Yemen, hoping eventually to reach the Gulf states of Saudi Arabia or Oman. Now, it's a treacherous journey spanning deserts, conflict zones, and turbulent seas. Yet tens of thousands make this crossing every year. According to the UN's IOM, more than 60,000 migrants, mostly from Ethiopia and Somalia, arrived in Yemen in 2024 alone, despite the country's ongoing humanitarian crisis. And this is not an isolated incident. Dozens of similar tragedies have been reported in the past year alone, including deaths off the coasts of both Yemen and Djibouti, many of them involving human traffickers. Now, the IOM describes the route from the Horn of Africa to Yemen as one of the world's busiest and most perilous mixed migration routes. Earlier on, I spoke to Abdusattor Esov, who's chief of mission for the IOM in Yemen, about the rescue efforts and why this deadly migration route remains so active.
What we understand is these people have really suffered, and especially in that kind of situation, we do reach out to them, and that maybe not immediately on the same day, but maybe a few days after that. What we found out from them that the journey was really dangerous, and it was, and they also tell how many people were on board and how people could manage to escape it. These are mostly the Ethiopians. Among them, we also understand there were some females, not only just male and female migrants, and also some minors as well.
What are conditions like on these boats from what you've heard from survivors, especially the promise made by people smugglers of what I imagine is a comfortable journey, but what migrants actually find once they begin their, the journeys?
The smugglers put more migrants in the boat than the capacity of the boat that it carries. This is the reason. And when you are in the boat with a lot of people, and it's quite difficult to even not just comfortable seat, but quite overwhelmed by itself, is also the sign of the fact that it is quite difficult. And yes, the promise is there. and the cost of the smuggling varies of how much you have to pay, how much it will cost you, and what kind of boat it will take you to the offshores. And of course, there is no guarantee that they will get what they are promised to.
Are you aware whether there are any measures to crack down on these people smugglers who make promises to these migrants and effectively lead them into this situation?
Well, I mean, the smuggling network, as you may know, is quite, it's a cross-border network. The smuggling problem cannot be solved by one country or one entity. It has to be solved with bringing different countries involved here. So that's why IOM always calls for the interstate dialogue. The whole journey of the people, where the whole network is involved, start from the place of their origin until they reach their destination. It's not just the boat they're coming. It's not just the people who are in charge for bringing them on the boat, but the whole entire network. We have to understand the needs, and also we have to address it. So what is also important here, and that's what is the reason why people are taking this journey, is the absence of the legal pathways to the migration, right?
Some of the countries that these migrants are heading to say they are overwhelmed with migration attempts, so to speak. Do you fear that the situation could get worse in the coming days as more migrants desperate to get to some of these countries take such unsafe routes?
What we think it's important is to look holistically at this issue, to look at the system of the migration management system of those countries that they need for that labor forces, for their economy, and for the supplies of the labor forces of the countries of the original countries of sending countries. So while the network will still be there, because there is, as I said, there is a demand. That's why this smuggling network will find its way and going it, because people are in need, and people know that if they're lucky, they can reach out and they will be successful. But unfortunately, not all of them will be successful, and they unfortunately take this kind of dangerous journey. So the awareness raising is important, and telling to the people about what the legal pathways are there, and of course, enhancing those legal pathways so that we reduce the risk of smuggling.
Yemen is in the middle of a war. What are some of the different groups in charge in Yemen? How are they responding to the increased number of migrants trying to use Yemen as a transit to Saudi Arabia and other countries?
Even Yemen itself is not in a position to be able to respond to that kind of number of the people coming to their offshores, to the shores. And then we receive the most vulnerable ones. We also take care of those who come with medical conditions. Unfortunately, a lot of they would come, and also try to help them to go back home, voluntary if they choose to go through our voluntary humanitarian flights.
Now, here in Kenya, a BBC Africa Eye investigation has revealed how women, known as madams, have involved children as young as 13 in prostitution in Kenya. In the transit town of Mai Mahiu in Kenya's Great Rift Valley, undercover reporters exposed two women exploiting children, one claiming to have a girl as young as 13 years old. Well, in Kenya, the trafficking or sale of minors under the age of 18 carries a prison sentence ranging from 10 years to life. The film also follows the work of a woman known as Baby Girl, who's on a mission to rescue and protect girls who've been abused and ensure that they have a brighter future. Baby Girl, who's been a sex worker for 40 years, has been supported through a USAID stipend to protect her community and help prevent the spread of HIV. But as USAID contracts come to an end in Kenya, the future is uncertain. The BBC's Jerry Mwangi brings us that report, and a warning: some viewers might find the contents of this piece distressing.
This town is a vital transit hub for transporting goods and people across Kenya into neighboring countries. It's known for prostitution, but it's also a breeding ground for child sexual abuse. Two undercover reporters posing as sex workers have spent months gaining the trust of women, known as madams, who exploit children for sex.
I have one who's 13, turning 14 next month.
This woman calls herself Nyambura.
You can't just bring them out openly in town. I only sneak them out at night in great secrecy. They're still children, so it's easy to manipulate them by handing them sweets.
She brings our undercover reporter to meet a group of young girls.
Sometimes you have sex with multiple people. You get injured and harassed by clients. The clients force you to do unimaginable things.
There aren't any recent statistics on the number of children forced into Kenya's sex industry, but it's easy to find them here.
How are you? I'm good, I'm good.
Former sex worker Baby Girl provides refuge for children. Orphaned or fleeing broken homes, all 4 of these girls were forced into sex work by madams in Maimahio.
I reached my limit, but I had no one.
I've got no one.
Class 6, 12. How old were you?
I was 12 by then.
She would bring men to me, the men would use me, and she would take the money.
There were children when these atrocities happened to them. Some of them were running away from home because there was no food and they wanted to provide for their siblings. And running into the community ate them whole because it didn't take care of them either. Nakuru County has one of the highest levels of HIV infection in Kenya. Baby Girl, supported by USAID, does outreach work in the community. But with cuts to USAID, things are about to change.
From September, we will be unemployed.
So what happens now?
I don't know. Tell me. You see how vulnerable these children are. How would they survive on their own?
The US government did not respond to comments made about the likely impact of stopping USAID funding. Back on the streets of Maimahio, there are still children caught in a cycle of abuse. An undercover reporter meets another madam called Chepto.
You carry out this kind of business in great secrecy because it is illegal.
She takes her to meet 2 girls who she says work for her.
How many men do you have sex with in a day?
An average of 5 men.
What will happen when you refuse to have unprotected sex?
I have to. I will be chased away and have nowhere to go. I am an orphan.
We gave all our evidence to the Kenyan police in March. They say the women and girls cannot be traced. To date, there have been no arrests. Njeri Mwangi, BBC News.
Well, let's now get further context from Tsitsi Matekaire, Global Lead and Sexual Exploitation Equality Now. She joins us from London, but Equality Now has programs in at least 2 counties in Kenya. Tsitsi, thank you so much for your time. Are any of the findings from this BBC investigation new to you?
I would say that the findings are shocking, but not surprising. I think when we think about sexual exploitation of children, one of the things we need to take into account is that this is organized crime. It usually operates as part of organized criminal networks. Sexual exploitation of children isn't random. It's a high-profit, low-risk criminal enterprise. So in many cases, as we have heard from the story, it involves organized criminal networks, so multiple individuals that are working together to ensure that children are available and that they are sold repeatedly for profit. At the same time, because there's such an increasing demand for younger and younger girls and the sort of high profits that this generates, more and more younger girls in Kenya and indeed across Africa are at risk. The latest report from the UNODC, reports that at least a third of all trafficking victims are children, and the majority of them are girls.
So in your view and from your research, what do the authorities need to do differently to ensure that, it's not easy to run some of the operations that we've seen as per that investigation?
Yes, I think in the context of Kenya, what is really clear and progressive and commendable is that the country has really some strong laws against child trafficking and sexual exploitation. So a robust Counter Trafficking in Persons Act, the Sexual Offences Act, and the Children's Act as well, which was recently reviewed in 2022. But I think the challenge is really around enforcement. So enforcement remains a major challenge. We've seen from the part of government that they've made some progress in strengthening law enforcement institutions, in ensuring that justice is available at the local level through the court users committees, for instance. But the reality is that very few of these cases actually reach the courts, and survivors then often lose faith in the justice system due to failures in reporting, in investigation, and in prosecution of those offenses. So really it's about government taking... Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, let me jump in very briefly if you can. The impact of the USAID funding cuts when the funds run out, what do you see that as affecting in terms of the work that you do?
There's one challenge around support for local organizations that are doing this work at the local level, but also a huge impact on communities that are already vulnerable and will become much more vulnerable. And then this means that more and more younger girls will be at the risk of sexual exploitation.
Tsitsi Matekaire, thank you so much for joining us on the program. The global lead and sexual exploitation equality, now speaking with us regarding that BBC investigation. Thanks so much. Well, you're watching Focus on Africa, still to come on the program. An endangered species. They're described as the most beautiful snails in the world. We hear from the scientists who are trying to save them. Thanks for staying with us. You're watching Focus on Africa. Now, injury, it's part and parcel of being an elite athlete, but sometimes it can be tough to take. Tanzania's Aisha Masaka missed out on the recent Women's Africa Cup of Nations after picking up a knee injury during the team's pre-tournament training camp. Following on from a serious shoulder problem, it was the latest setback for a player who last summer became the first Tanzanian woman to play alongside some of the world's best in England's top flight after joining Brighton and Hove Albion. Now, BBC Sport Africa's Ian Williams took Masaka to Brighton's famous seafront to speak to her about that move, dealing with injury and entertaining hundreds of thousands of followers on social media.
Aisha.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Thank you very much for inviting us down to Brighton. How do you enjoy your new home here in Brighton?
I'm enjoying here. It's a lovely country. It's raining a lot. Tanzania is very hot and dry.
This is really sort of classic English seaside town here in Brighton. So do you come down to do things here on the seafront?
I come a couple of times with a friend, just walk and grab coffee.
Well, you got a hot chocolate today, but the sun is out, so I think we should go and get an ice cream, yeah?
Yeah, let's go to get an ice cream.
2 ice creams for us.
There you go.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Enjoy, Aisha.
You too.
A record-breaking season for Brighton women. They finished 5th in the Women's Super League, but you sadly did not play a great deal, largely because of injury. How has the season been for you?
It's not a good season for me. I need more experience. I need more to play.
What do you think you might be learning here, surrounded by experienced players, the likes of Fran Kirby on your side, that will help you as you develop as a player?
Frank Kirby, Nikita Paris, the big player in England, the big player in this league, so they're nice. They help young people, young players like me. They teach me to be patient, like these injuries. My time will come and I will shine.
Emotionally, mentally, how is it? Do you ever get lonely?
It's not really lonely because I have good friends, good staff in the team. I can miss my family home, back home.
Do you get a bit homesick?
Not really.
No?
No.
No, you're happy here?
I'm happy.
You're happy and confident. You don't
Yeah.
tell your mum that though?
I'm not gonna tell Mum that, but I'm happy here.
And what do you do with your spare time?
I watch Netflix and dancing sometimes. I love to
I was
dance.
going to ask you about this. You like social media, yeah? Big on the Instagram and the TikTok.
I love to dance. It's like make me happy. It's one of the communication with the people from back home. They comment a lot. They comment a lot.
How do you deal with the negative comments? Are you able to just put them aside and not worry about them? Or
I don't care.
You're the first Tanzanian woman to come and play in England in the top flight here.
That's right.
Are you proud about that?
Yes, I'm proud about that. As a country, they're proud about that as well. My parents, my family.
Now, the pier is very famous in Brighton. In fact, it's probably the most famous thing about Brighton. Have you been on the pier yet?
Not yet.
No?
No.
Let's go and have a look at the pier then. What do you think is going on with the growth of women's football in Africa at the moment? Are you happy with the way it's coming up?
I'm very happy, especially Tanzania women players. Improvement is getting fast. If you look 5 years ago, was no professional player from Tanzania play outside of Tanzania. So it's growing up very quickly.
And what role are you playing in that, do you think, by coming here?
I inspire many players, girls and boys.
And how do you feel about that?
I'm very proud and I will work hard to prove that everything is possible and you can go far as you can when you have a target, when you have a goal.
Let's now talk about snails. Some of you might identify them as more with slime than beauty. But one species found only in the forests of Cuba has been described as the most striking in the world because of its colorful shell. And that makes them vulnerable because collectors and traders want to use them as decorative objects. Now, researchers are working on ways to protect them, as our science correspondent Victoria Gill now reports.
These are Polymeta snails, described by some mollusk experts as the most beautiful snails in the world, found only in the forests of Cuba. But while they're increasingly rare in the wild, it's remarkably easy to buy their shells online.
So I'm surprised that when we look online here, we can see a lot of Polymeta shells for sale in the UK.
These shells are bought and sold as beautiful decorative objects, but each of these was once a living animal.
How much of a concern is this, seeing them for sale?
And for some of these species, we know they're really quite endangered. So it wouldn't take much for somebody to collect them in Cuba and to trade them, for then it could cause some species to go extinct.
So snail biologists are racing to study and to try to conserve these creatures before they disappear from the wild.
Welcome to Nottingham's Snail Lab.
Here at the University of Nottingham's School of Life Sciences, evolutionary geneticists are analysing samples of the Polymeta snail DNA, decoding the animal's biological blueprint. They want to know how many different species there are, how they're related to each other, and what part of their genetic code gives them their extraordinary, unique colour patterns.
Hola Bernardo, ¿cómo estás?
Bien, muy bien.
The researchers here are working closely with their colleagues in Cuba. There they've embarked on the challenging task of breeding the snails in captivity.
Look at this. This is the snail.
Wow.
They are here for 5 months. And at the moment, almost all adults.
Wow.
It is difficult because we have many blackouts, but they are doing well.
With just a little bit of tissue from one of those snails, we can start to mine information from the genome of the snails. This is a project of two parts where my colleagues in Cuba are trying to understand the basics of biology, where the snails are, all kinds of questions to do with that. And then the genetic information that we can then bring in can also ultimately contribute to the conservation.
It's illegal to take polymeter snails or their shells out of Cuba, but it is legal to sell the shells elsewhere. The researchers hope that understanding their biological secrets and raising the polymeter's profile will help keep these colourful creatures in the forests where they belong. Victoria Gill, BBC News.
And now for a reminder of our top story. At least 76 people, coming mainly from Ethiopia, have died after a boat carrying over 150 people capsized in bad weather off the coast of Yemen's southern Abyan province. Reports say dozens are still missing and 32 people have been rescued alive. A health official said that rescue operations were still underway to try and recover the remaining bodies. Well, thanks for staying with us. Remember, you can get in touch with me and some of the team. Let us know your thoughts regarding this program. You can find me on X. I'm at Wahiga Mwaura. Also, check out at BBC Africa for your news updates. Well, that's it for this program. Let's do this again tomorrow. From me, Wahiga Mwaura, and the rest of the team, we'll see you then. Goodbye.
When expectations are high, there's no room for uncertainty. To maximize impact, your logo needs to look great, on the right gear, and arrive on time. And that starts with 4imprint. To get your brand noticed, visit 4imprint.com.
4imprint, for certain. Hey folks, Chris Cunahan here with Leaf Filter, America's largest gutter and gutter protection company. Leaf Filter has over 150 locations and has been installed on over 1 million homes. We've been protecting homes now for over 20 years. Our patented technology offers total protection for your home and comes with a lifetime transferable warranty.
Schedule your free gutter inspection today. No money down and payments starting at $50 a month. Call 833-LEAF-FILTER or visit leaffilter.com to get started.
This is the one who keeps it moving. He stocks the right parts and knows just where to find them. Because this is about more than business. The industrial grade products you need. Call, click, or stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
I was on air when the London 7/7 attacks happened. That day was different. because of the sheer volume of information we were grappling with in real time. We couldn't let the desperation for news influence our reporting or be overwhelmed by the magnitude of what we were witnessing. Today, as we wade through endless waves of misinformation, it's vital that we don't just ask the questions, we question the answers. I'm Matthew Emery-Waller on Verified Live for BBC News.
It's 6 p.m. in London. This is The World Today with Mariam Mashiri. Israel's Prime Minister is reported to be considering expanding military operations in Gaza, despite growing domestic criticism, including from many former defense chiefs. The brother of one of the hostages, shown in a video released by Hamas over the weekend, tells the BBC of his horror.
Seeing those images of my brother as a human skeleton, we understood it's a new kind of cruelty. It's worse than the Taliban, than Al-Qaeda, worse than ISIS. It's the lowest you can get.
80 years ago this week, the US dropped the world's first nuclear bombs on Japan. We'll bring a special report. Also coming up on The World Today, what a cliffhanger. India win a nail-biting fifth test against England by 6 runs. We'll have all the latest action from BBC Sport. And with this year's proms fully underway, we'll be speaking to award-winning trumpeter Pacho Flores, who'll be making his debut this week at the Royal Albert Hall. Hello and welcome to The World Today on BBC News. We start with Gaza and the pressure building on Benjamin Netanyahu to bring the war to an end. These are the main developments today. Well, the main hostage support group in Israel has accused the Prime Minister of leading the country and their loved ones to doom after reports emerge that he wants to expand military operations in Gaza. The families say they want a ceasefire deal, and the calls from within Israel are getting louder. Hundreds of retired Israeli security officials have written an open letter to Benjamin Netanyahu's closest ally, Donald Trump, to put pressure on the Israeli leader. They say Hamas no longer poses a strategic threat to Israel. Meanwhile, in Gaza, the Hamas-run health ministry says 5 more people have died of malnutrition in the past 24 hours. And the BBC has verified footage posted online on Sunday showing people being shot near an aid distribution site in central Gaza. The location is around 500 metres from a site run by the Israeli and US-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. Well, let's look now at what's happening with the hostages still being held in Gaza. Hamas released a propaganda video at the weekend of one of an emaciated hostage and a warning: you may find this picture distressing. Well, this image was taken from the video where Eviatar David is also seen digging a grave in an underground tunnel. His brother has spoken to BBC News since that video was released. Here's what he had to say.
He's a human skeleton. He was being starved to the point where he can be dead at any moment. And he suffers a great deal. He barely can speak, he barely can move. He's in that point, so we have to be so focused on delivering the message, which is Eviatar is dying. We need to give him medicine, we need to give him food, proper food, and he needs to get this treatment now, or else he will die. And all the leaders of the world should unite in that message right now to save Eviatar, to save the hostages from the cruel, twisted hands of Hamas.
When you see the images of your brother, and then obviously there have been also images of Palestinians very malnourished, starving, very thin as well. What do you feel when you see those images?
I feel sorry for every human life lost. But I believe that Hamas is using the starvation of its own people as some kind of a twisted campaign to manipulate all the world right now, to look over Hamas atrocities. But right now, and They proved it to us. They sent Eviatar, my brother, they showed that he's a human skeleton. They intentionally starved him to a near-death situation. We saw the chubby hand of his captors in that video. We know that Hamas has plenty of food, and they just decide who are going to die and who is going to live. So they are using their own people as human shields and as pawn in that sick game, and they are also using the hostages now.
What would your message be to Prime Minister Netanyahu if you could speak to him? What would you say to him?
I did spoke to him 2 days ago, and he listened to my mom. It was a conversation between him and my parents. He listened to my mom crying, begging. We really feel that Eviatar's life is on stake right now. He listened to us telling him that we pray and we count on him to make the right decisions. Those images of my brother as a human skeleton, we understood it's a new kind of cruelty. It's worse than the Taliban, than Al-Qaeda, worse than ISIS. It's the lowest you can get. Prime Minister, we need you now to make sure they get proper food, they get proper medicine, treatment. That's what we need right now. We need to save Eviatar's life. My parents are shattered. My father can't sleep. My mom cries all day. My sister, somehow, my younger sister, fighting alongside me. When they watched the video, and my father could barely recognize his own son's voice.
Well, that was the brother of the Israeli hostage, Eviatar David, talking to the BBC. Well, let's stay in Gaza now. The aid distribution continues, though many aid agencies say that too little is reaching the civilian population there. This was the scene near a site run by the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation in the centre of the territory earlier on Monday. Some eyewitnesses say they had to wait for more than 6 hours before they could collect anything. Airdrops of aid are continuing as well, but they differ from the aid being given out at collection points, as it's never precisely clear where those aid packages will fall. Here's one resident of Gaza talking about the difficulties that which creates.
It's dangerous. It's full of death. It's all humiliating. Just 30% of people are able to get aid. The rest don't get anything. What follows then is infighting, stabbings. Well, thank you for bringing us aid, but this aid, it just brings danger and death with it. It all leads to death.
Well, hundreds of retired Israeli security officials have written an open letter to the US President Donald Trump, urging him to pressure their own government to end the war. The signatories include former heads of Mossad and Shin Bet security services and 3 former military chiefs of staff. In their letter, they say Hamas no longer poses a strategic threat to Israel, and so the military operations in Gaza are no longer just. One of the signatories is Itamar Yar, a former deputy head of Israel's National Security Council.
The armed forces have achieved big successes against Hamas in Gaza, against Hezbollah in the north, against others in the area, including Iran and so on. But we ask ourselves, is it the time, especially when Israel showed that we can do things that almost nobody believed that we are able to do, if it is not the time to stop and to try to find and to use these successes for all kind of different agreements or understandings, or at least a process.
Well, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is putting forward a different approach with increased military activity on the table. Here's what he had to say during a cabinet meeting.
We need to continue standing together, fighting together, in order to achieve all the war objectives we have set: the defeat of the enemy, the release of our hostages, and ensuring that Gaza will no longer pose a threat to Israel.
Let's cross live now and speak to our correspondent in Jerusalem, Hugo Bechega. Hugo, tell me a bit more now about the pressure on Mr. Netanyahu.
Yeah, Mariam, so
the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is under pressure from multiple sides. Internationally, Israel faces growing isolation. There's still a lot of anger over the catastrophic humanitarian situation in Gaza that the United Nations, aid agencies, many of Israel's allies blame on Israeli policies, on the restrictions on the entry and delivery of aid imposed by Israel, something that the Israeli authorities have strongly rejected. And domestically, there is growing pressure on the Prime Minister as well. So you've mentioned the letter by these 600 former senior military officials, essentially saying that, you know, the goal of defeating Hamas has already been achieved, that Hamas as a military organization no longer poses a threat to Israel. And there is more pressure from the families of the hostages, particularly after those videos with those two hostages who were seen emaciated, extremely weak, shocking videos. One of them, Eviatar David, was seen digging a grave inside a tunnel, saying that he believes that this is going to be his own grave. So very disturbing videos, and the families again urging the Prime Minister to strike a deal with Hamas. They say, many of these families say, that this strategy of military pressure on Hamas to try to force it to strike a deal with Israel hasn't really worked, has failed to guarantee the release of the hostages. 20 hostages believed to be alive in Gaza, and their relatives are saying that time is running out to guarantee their release. So they are again urging the government to strike a deal with Hamas. But on the other hand, the Prime Minister is under pressure from those hardline ultra-nationalist members of his governing coalition who have been threatening to quit the government if there is any kind of deal with Hamas. Itamar Ben-Gvir, Bezalel Smotrich, the hardline members of the government who are against the end of the war. They've been talking about resettling Gaza with Jews, expelling the Palestinian population of Gaza. And again, if they go ahead and quit the government, this could lead to the collapse of the coalition. And many in Israel believe that the Prime Minister is prolonging the conflict to guarantee the survival of his governing coalition. So the Prime Minister now is facing pressure from multiple sides, and now he is indicating that he could decide to expand the military operation in Gaza.
Hugo, thank you very much. Well, let's speak now to Gideon Levy, who's journalist and columnist for the Israeli newspaper Haaretz. And Gideon, thanks for joining us. And let's just ask you, if we can, you know, we've seen these petitions, we've just heard Hugo talking about them. What difference, if any, are they going to make on Mr. Netanyahu's plans?
I have my doubts. I don't think they will have much effect. By the way, the Israeli media hardly picked it up. But we have to understand that the only effective pressure on Netanyahu right now is from the right-wingers, because they are his partners. All the rest are not his political base. He can easily ignore it. He's after 2 years of demonstrations, more than 2 years of demonstrations on all issues, and very massive and quite impressive demonstration, but that's not his political base. And his political base is supporting him and supporting the war and wants the war to continue. And I think that also Netanyahu by himself wants the war to continue. And therefore, as long as the Americans don't get into the picture with massive pressure, I don't see the war stopping.
Well, that's it, isn't it? It's what many people are saying, that it needs US pressure, but will the US government pressure the Israeli government? And if so, in what way?
Oh, in what way? Believe me, President Donald Trump knows exactly how to do it. There's nothing more simple than bringing Israel to stop the war, because Israel is depending right now on the United States like never before, because Israel is so isolated, because we are in the middle of so-called war. We need the ammunition, we need the support within hours, if not within days, maybe. The war will stop once that the American administration will be decisive enough and decide that this war should stop. By the way, I must remind you, when the war with Iran, those 12 horrible days of war with Iran, it came to an end within hours once the president of the United States told Israel, stop it now, and it stopped.
We've done that 20 years ago.
Tell me a little bit more, if you can, about what any ceasefire deal will look like, given we are where we are right now in this conflict.
There's only one ceasefire which will be accepted by Hamas.